Jim, our president, is driving home from Pittsburgh tonight and is not available, so I volunteered to be MC for the evening. I'd like to introduce Lorette and Bill Cheswick. We have a singular focus for tonight, which is about doing microscope work. And as you can see, we're going to have a really full interactive. There's a presentation to take you through some of the basics, and there are microscopes set up around the room. I'm going to let Lorette introduce herself and tell you what's on the agenda just to get things moving along. We'll take a break somewhere in the middle. I do want to say that we have honey tasting tonight, like we typically do. Bob Kloss and I recently got back from the trip with Tim Schuler going to Malawi, and Bob has Malawi honey to sample tonight. You're going to want to try that. There's a little bit different depth to it. You'll see when the time comes. So that being said, Lorette, thank you, and I'll let you go.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I really appreciate your coming tonight to spend a little time and explore bees a little closer than the way we normally get to see them, which is zooming in and out of hives or on frames. I would like to know how many of you have worked with microscopes before. Hand raise? Okay, I will try not to bore you. The person who you will probably want to talk to a little more than me is my husband, because he has been busy over the last month working with pollen samples, pollen grains, and separating them out, as you can see from that poster, so that we can differentiate pollen from different flowers that are coming in to the hives. And that is one of our focuses this year. So I was trained at the University of Pennsylvania in clinical enzymology. So my microscopy was in different kinds of dissection, usually at the human tissue level. That was part of my research work, and I've always loved working with microscopes and doing slides. And part of what I brought tonight are some of the slides that I made as an undergrad and as a graduate student, but almost all of those are chick embryos, just to play with so that people can see the differences. What we do in the hive, we look at more just so that we can see closer. And the technique that I learned at EAS 2 years ago and then again last year was how to do a gut dissection so that you can look for nosema in the gut and you can see whether or not there are morphological changes in the gut. And I'm going to talk about that, but at this time of year, I had really hoped I'd be able to get into my hive and get really fresh bees into my hives this week. I never had a chance. So I have bees. I have one very frisky bee in one of those jars, but I want to show you how to do a dissection and how to tease apart a bee, and you can go home and do the same thing. It's very easy if you have the right tools. And I'm going to get started with looking at things closer because you have many more tools than I thought you would when I started getting ready for this talk months and months ago. So, how many times have you grabbed a knife and thought it was sharp and it was absolutely dead dull? Well, this is one of my kitchen knives, and This is the edge, and there are some little nicks, and that's at 400 magnification. I took it with my iPhone. How many of you have smartphones? I want you to get them out right now. I had so much fun with this. This was really cool. I want you to look at the table in front of you, just with the camera. Do you know how to zoom with the camera?
Yeah.
Right? So I want you to see how far away from the table or from your jeans you can get and have it in focus. Do something inanimate first. Now, I've got a couple of prepared slides. Look at the prepared slides. Using your phones. This is Saccharomyces. One of these slides has a bee wing and a bee leg. The others have Drosophila, you know, other bugs, but things that you can look at. And I want you to pass them around so that everybody gets a chance. I always have to. These are sagittal sections of chick embryos, so hand them out and make sure everything comes back to me. Please. Okay, with the regular iPhone, you're doing 5 to 10 times.
This is broken.
Okay?
Do you want to take the broken?
Do any of you have OS 10 on your phones? If you do, go into settings, into it's not adaptability, accessibility. It's to help people who have visual limitations and turn on magnifier. That's going to give you an additional digital input of from 100 to 1500 magnification with your iPhone. You don't need my scopes. That's for an iPhone. I did not check for Androids. But my bet is that Androids have accessibility and a very similar magnifier, and I was stunned. You can take pictures. Yeah.
Accessibility.
Okay, so when I was a kid, we used these. These are little handheld magnifiers. You put them right on top of the slide, and you can look down through the top, and there's a focus. You can play with old-time technology. It all happens. What I did do was, I was grabbing a quick bite to eat for lunch, so I took pictures of my salad, and then I did 5 to 10 resolution, and then I used the zoom, and I just wanted to show you the scale of just how much you could magnify using the magnifier. I was really impressed, and that's technology most people have readily at their fingertips. And I don't know anybody in the beekeeping community that's using that accessibility magnifier that way. You can use that outside, you can use it inside, you can turn a light on, you can turn a light off, and it even has a stabilizing function so that you don't jitter at the higher magnification. It is slick. The magnifier is in the operating system for OS 10. It's one of the additions.
What is OS 10?
OS 10
iOS.
is the iOS. It's the operating system for. I have an iPhone 6. When you update your iOS, it's in the accessibility section of settings. Has anybody found it and is playing with it?
3 clicks makes it amazing.
Isn't it just slicker than who? Yeah, well,
That's cool.
one of the things you're going to find
Yeah.
is that lighting is incredibly important. If you look at the various screens, you're going to see differences in background focus, and that's directly related to the clarity of the image and the amount of light coming in. So old-time microscopes had to have external lighting sources. Our digital microscopes, these two blue things that are sort of play toys, they're fairly fancy play toys. They have a built-in light. It's not very bright, so it's actually kind of hard to look at a lot of detail. But depending upon what you want, it can be good enough for your purposes. So think about when you've got a hand lens or your phone, what the light quality is for when you're taking pictures, because that's going to matter in terms of reproducibility, and you're being able to look at it later and say, oh yes, that's what I was trying to capture. Okay? Now, when you're in the bee yard, I don't know about you, but I know when I'm working, if I'm trying to work, I end up with a fair amount of propolis on some of my hands, and definitely on the home button of my iPhone. Think about that before you decide to start taking pictures in the bee yard. One of the things we've done is my husband will take the pictures so that I don't have to, but I'll position things so that he can get the best angle, the best light.
I have an iPhone 10, which I've offered to buy her, and she won't take it. It doesn't have a home button. You can even have Siri take the picture for you.
Cheese.
He's building a case.
Yeah.
He's building a case.
She says cheese.
And it takes it. Oh, that's great.
So I just want you to think about those things so that you aren't surprised when you realize you've got propolis on your home button and you can't turn it on and off. I really do want to remind you that if you don't have to get the fancy sample containers I get and label, you really can save pill bottles and use freezer bags, not regular Ziplocs, because if you want to send specimens to the state pathology lab, you need a freezer bag so that the liquid doesn't burst in shipment. Have any of you sent any samples to the state for an analysis for any diseases? You know you can do it fairly inexpensively. It's $15 to $30 depending upon the choice. And when you do that, you can take a couple of the bees that you're sending them and you can look at them with your iPhone and take them apart and look at them. And I really recommend doing that. So it doesn't have to get all fancy, but it can. My husband and I are retired scientists, so we have wet lab in our house. We do not do anything too explosive. We do not do anything that's illegal. We have never done any of those things, but we do use our lab. And we take all of these different things to the lab to look at them. We do have full brand new binocular microscope with a big camera setup. It was just too much. I wanted to bring all of these so that people could actually turn and play. When you bring a brand new lab microscope, nobody be allowed near it. I want you to be able to touch them and feel
That's
it.
expensive.
Well,
It's $500. It's not cheap, but it's not awful. The camera, $500 for
Our
a
new-
really nice one.
yeah, it's a beautiful scope. It really is quite lovely.
We have a picture.
Yeah. This is a diagram of the two Intel scopes. You can get these on eBay for less than $50. They were $99 new. They do 10, 60, and 200 magnification. That blue. And there's another one behind this. Okay, thank you. My husband is the Vanna and the Ava Gardner of the farm. And what's nice about playing with these, the Intel scopes, is that you're not afraid to do that with a bunch of people. Kids can work with them. They're very, I dropped one on the floor setting up, and I didn't get upset or embarrassed. I just put it back together again. So they're very versatile, and you can use them in lots of different ways. So I recommend that. And the program that drives these screens costs $12. And you can pay for it online, and it works for your entire family. It's really pretty cheap to be able to be that flexible.
Lorette,
Yes, sir.
you mentioned the slides are going to be on the net.
I will.
But I mean, there are people taking pictures and stuff.
Oh, are they? Okay. All of these slides will be on the net. You can go look at this talk. And you'll see that, and I've got business cards over on that table, which will give you the link, and my husband has cards over here. So, doesn't really look good there, but if you see on this screen, this is a bee leg, and some of you might have seen the prepared slide that has the leg and the wing. I want you to, I hope you will have used your phone to look at them more closely. Okay. So when you have an image like this that's really very dim, I learned a trick today from my husband. You run it through Preview on a Mac, and it's remarkable how it cleans it right up. So any kind of Photoshop, image Equalizing software will clean it up and make it much better. This is probably the most important slide. Take notes. You want to refer back to what you've been looking at. You want to learn from your studies. And the way you do that is you write down your observations. No chemistry teacher, no biology teacher, no entomologist is ever going to look at them and grade them. The only person who cares is you. So take notes so that you can refer back. I dictate to a note-taking app on my iPad, and I just keep a running account per hive per yard. So think about that in terms of keeping records. So, boy, I don't know that you can see it, but this is my lab, our wet lab. There are 2 big desks, and we have the appropriate medicine cabinets from IKEA, and a shelf for lots of different microscopes, and then the big binocular microscope. Trinocular. Oh, because of the top. Because of the camera. It also does other things that are very fancy. Does it do dark field? It did not. So there are different things that it can do that your basic run-of-the-mill student lab microscope can't do, but it really is a beautiful scope. And in this case, I think my husband needs to say.
Well, what do you want me to say? Those are my notes there. I've got some pollen shots I took trying to figure out which is different, because you got to do a census of the pollen and find out what's a common piece of pollen and what isn't. And as you can see, they look different. And is it the same pollen rotated, or is it a different one? I don't know. This stuff is complicated. I'm not sure what you showed me the other stuff.
Well, what I like is that he's got his collection of photographs, and he's counting the types of pollen and making a note directly on the page. I can see his note-taking, he can see it, we can refer back to it. And then the other samples, this is a box that is nothing but full of slides that have been stained. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are overstained. The point is that he's building a repertoire, a library of different kinds of plant pollens.
Do you have like a chart of what pollens are out of what time of year?
Yes. Yeah.
Is that available on the internet?
There are a number of them available on the internet. Yes.
There's some kind of agricultural setting that keeps a record of these pollens, because they go back, like when they get diagnosed, the Iceman or something, they say, oh, he's got this in his stomach, and this is the pollen in these trees.
You want me to jump in?
Didn't somebody record some of this stuff?
Yeah.
So I'm a science guy from the days of Sputnik, and I thought, we got some really great honey 2 summers ago, which I call butter honey. I spun it, I tasted it. It tasted like butter. It was smooth. Now, there was no cows around. It was, and I said, first of all, butter honey, what a great marketing name. And secondly, I wonder what plants this came from. And we live about 1.6 miles from here in the middle of a vast array of flowers and wetlands and stuff. And I've got a whole talk about this. But the question was, what plant made it taste like butter honey? We don't know the answer. I said, well, I can look at the pollen inside the honey. I will learn about it and buy some of the equipment and see if I can figure this out. And it turns out it's called pallology. And it's used in forensics to find out where you've been, because there's pollen all over the place. Believe me, there's pollen all over the place. It's used in old stuff. They want to go find out, you know, what was around at the time. And the problem is, this takes, there are a few people in the country who are good at this. They have been studying it for decades. Because every plant has different pollen. And sometimes a family will all have pollen that looks the same, and others, individual species will have different pollen. So it's actually really hard. But my goal was, well, we only have 2 or 3 plants that we've got a lot of blooming at that time. I can look at what their pollen looks like and see what's mostly in the honey and try to figure it out. And I got a whole talk on that, which I can give some other time if you folks. This goes all about this, you know, analyzing honey and trying to figure out what's in it.
But there's no way they can go back to a record and say, oh, this looks like what I got. You're saying it's that diverse that you can't pinpoint it.
Well,
There are repositories of different plant pollens at
yes.
Texas A&M, at Cornell. They are
Google-
jealously guarded.
Oh, no, the internet is rife
Well-
with images of pollen. If you Google for Prunus maybe pollen, you will get a whole bunch of pictures that have been put up. Cambridge has a whole bunch of them, thousands of them. Some of them are proprietary because if you're a forensic pollen examiner, you need this data and they want you to pay for it. But you can go Google for pollen and you get lots of it.
I also have references at the end of the talk,
Yeah,
so
so
you
at some
can
point-
look for pollens that are appropriate for the Mid-Atlantic region. So, you know, plants that you would expect to find. In terms of our talk and in terms of bees, dissection is where we would go after gross anatomy. And I'm assuming everyone here knows the basic outside of a bee, all the different parts as you look at the gross anatomy. But if you can take a bee, a dead bee, and then cut it open, you want tools that look like this. And when I was at EAS, what I noticed was most of their dissection tools are for high school cutting open a frog or, you know, a guinea pig. That's way too big. You cannot work with insects. This kit is for physicians. It costs $30 on eBay. It's cheap. It's a dissection kit. It's a medical student's dissection kit. And what it does, when you look at it, is every single piece in here goes down to a very fine point. If any of you ever work with a fountain pen, you never share fountain pens because everybody holds a pen slightly differently. That's exactly the same thing with these dissection tools. Once you start working it, you don't want anybody else touching it because how the points come together is absolutely uniquely fitted to you as you work them. So, you know, I'm not going to pass these around because they're pointy. I want you to come up here and look at them. And yeah, I don't want anybody to run or pass around scissors. That's funny. Basic gut anatomy. All of you should be familiar with looking at that, and you've probably seen on Google what it looks like to pull out a gut. And it is remarkably easy on a fresh specimen. You cut off the head, you snip the sides of the abdomen, you lift off the exoskeleton, and then you tease out the gut. Put it on a slide, put the cover slide on, squish, and stick it under a scope. Use a little bit of water and keep it moist, and you'll be able to see the striations in the gut for the smooth muscle. It's really cool. I wish I had been able to set it up completely for you with really fresh bees, but next time. So this, the other thing is that people are used to using beeswax, hard to stick their bees on. That's not a very good surface for working with the exoskeleton. This is a specially designed foam that's sort of like color forms. Much easier, it holds on to the outside of the bee so it doesn't scoot across. And then you use these laboratory dissection pins to hold the bee down. So I want people to come and look at that, and I can give you samples to play with, okay? So there's the insect friendly. And I wanted to remind you that when you're going into the hive, you're looking at what's around the inner cover, what's there. Do you ever find a spider that likes to be resident? I think they're very good for the hive. They help cut down on other insects trying to get in the top. And if you can note things like that, anybody who's afraid of spiders can maybe be a little bit more comfortable. But then as you drill down into the hive and you look at things like the bottom board, this is where you can use your phones. I brought a bottom board so that you can look for pieces of capping, you can look for pollen, you can look at dead bees directly on the bottom board, okay? And then, again, looking at the different parts of the bee under different lighting and different settings, it's going to give you more and more information. And I told you about preview. Once you get into pollen and into flowers, you start running stains. I would like my husband to say something about stains, because he has been having fun with stains.
I know you need stains to see things in the cell, and some stains show up different parts of the cell compared to others. So I just went to Amazon and looked up stains, and it turns out a package of 25 stains is cheap. So I just bought a whole bunch of stains. And so that's maybe not the answer you were looking for. You can see some of these things are coming in different colors. Those colors are all just the stain I had. It is true that some pollens have color, but for the most part, it's whatever I stain it. So the pretty pictures are pretty because of the colors I picked. Pollen has an outside called an exene, which is sort of a hard external surface. And that is the thing that usually gets the stain. They actually won't, well, I don't know. You can actually dissolve it away with really dangerous chemistry, but that's for another talk. So I don't have that much to say. We have, as I say, 25 stains in the house. I'm using about 3 of them. When I prepare a slide, I actually put 3 drops down. One is clear, so I can see it uncolored. One has saffronin O, which I think is where saffron comes from. I think it's the same color. And the other, I'll pick a different one and just see, is it strong enough and so on. There's a great tendency when you're first staining a slide to take a drop of this concentrated stuff and put it on there. And you get absolutely total color. You can't see anything through it. And it turns out you don't need much. These cells are 20 cubic microns. They're really tiny. They don't need a whole lot. And the stuff I actually put them on there, you can't see the color, but it gets in the cell. And that's what you see.
Can I share that?
Yeah, sure,
When you
please.
see pollen, when you see the bees coming through with pollen, lots of colors, are we not looking at pollen?
No, you're looking at pollen, but you're looking at a giant clump of it. This thing is less than the width of a human hair. And when you actually, and also, there's other crud in
But
there
isn't it
too.
not true that if a bee's flying around collecting pollen, is it only getting from that specific plant in each trip? Or is that not true?
Well, so there's pollen everywhere.
Right.
And checking honey to see what pollen is in it, you're going to get mostly where it came from. But there's no purity here. It depends on what's popular.
He's been looking at pollen in honey. He has not been looking
Yeah.
at pollen in.
That comes into the hive.
That's right. So
Right.
it's the schmutz that came into the hive and got around. And,
Okay.
Because we'll see the flowers and it looks similar to what's blooming, and we assume.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm getting pale yellow, white,
Right.
mid-yellow, sulfur yellow.
Yes.
These are all early blooming spring ephemerals.
but that's bulk pollen. When you take it down to individual pieces on a flat surface,
Yeah.
you usually can't see much color. You can see some. And there's often some oil with it. The lily, I've been using lily pollen. You know, you go to the shop, right? It smells great. It dumps lots of pollen. I have actually the upper left-hand blue ones over there on that are lily pollen. And they're big and bold and crackly and interesting and so on. But they actually come with a little bit of yellow oil on them, which you're supposed to wash off with ether. I haven't bothered doing that.
What's good about using lily pollen is that it's easily accessible any time of year, so you can develop your technique on that before you go outside. I happen to grow citrus, so this is a citrus blossom. I grow Prunus mume, Japanese apricot. They're in bloom at this time of year. So I'm getting one individual flower, I'm knocking it off onto a slide, and then staining that. I don't always have tons of those examples, so it's good to pick a flower that's cheap and readily accessible. So lily is a good practice. So there are different things that you use to help set the slide and to practice with that. And there are all sorts of protocols that are easily available. The blue notebook over there, that's all of the research articles that we collected to be able to start doing this summer. So if anybody wants to start flipping through, they can do that. And when you make a slide, you usually buy them in a case of 100 and 100 cover slips. So you can, and they're cheap.
$8, $10,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, it's nothing. So you put the bee part on the slide, you put the pollen on the slide, you put a drop of honey on the slide, all of these different things, and then you can look either with your phone or with a microscope or one of these other digital devices so that you can see it up close. And then really figure out what that tells you about your hive. And if you can associate that back to a specific plant, go have fun doing that detective work. I love looking at different kinds of tulips. There are tulips that have bright blue pollen. It's Tulipa humulus oculus cerula. Unbelievably, that color blue on that lady's shirt. That's how bright the blue is. There are, if any of you know the herb borage, that pollen is a kind of slate blue. And I know I've seen in bee culture entire articles on blue pollen plants throughout the year. There are people who just focus on finding blue pollen and then growing plants like that. So you can play with this. And what we're doing, obviously, is trying to figure out what plants on our farm are probably responsible for our butter honey. Didn't really come in as well this past year as it had previous years. And now that I've planted so many new trees and shrubs, we're really curious to see if it will continue to show up. I don't know. But the other thing is, do any of you know what the Pantone color of the year is this year? What's a Pantone color? It's kind of a fashion thing. Pantone is a company that does paint chips and color chips. I remember one year recently it was some form of the color lilac. This year it's ultraviolet. I don't know about you, but ultraviolet to me is actually what the bees notice. They can see in ultraviolet, not the deep blue purple that Pantone is saying. So we have some filters to put on that camera so that we can see the ultraviolet markings on flowers. And that's an additional thing that we're going to do in addition to the palynology that my husband's working on. So there's that. And this, when you start looking at different slides, play with the people around you to see if they can guess what you've been looking at, because they've never seen a bee leg. They've never seen a piece of paper up close. See if they can figure out what you're looking at. And in this case, this is a mimulus flower. They're, in my wetland, I have a mimulus called Mimulus ringens. It's actually blue. And the ultraviolet markings are, entomologists think they're actually runway markings for insects to know where to go to get into a nectary. And there are a number of different ways that you can test for that by doing mock-ups that have the exact same geometry but no markings, or some markings with the nectaries. So that's the kind of thing we would like to start correlating. And the references, Honey Bee Biology by Dewey Karen and Larry Connor is the main book for studying for becoming a master beekeeper. So this is one of the books I read to help me figure out what to do next. And the diagram of the bee gut biology anatomy is from this, which is also from the Master Beekeeping Required Reading. And Garden Plants for Honeybees by Peter Lintner. I'm going to show you, this is the part of our website that will have the slides up tonight. And I'm going to finish my end of the show, and I am going to go to my Kindle, because technology is amazing. We will now wait a moment as technology loads. And try again. Peter Lintner, I have that book, Plants for Honeybees, on my digital library. What is nice about it is that it has pollen along with images here. This is Corylus americanus. This is American filbert. And you can look at its grains of pollen in the lower right-hand picture or up close on my iPad. This is one of the major sources of really good early spring protein, along with pussy willow, Salix discolored, and that's my note to be quiet. So looking at a book like this that gives you both how honeybees use the plant, are they collecting only pollen, are they collecting only nectar, and then their images of what the pollen looks like. This is a pretty good lay person reference. And that's it. What I would like is, after the break, I want people to gather around the different tables, try things out, move things around. I handed all of these slides out. Please bring them up. Let's move things around in the microscopes and look and practice. That's it. Oh, and?
We've got the bottom of a beehive here. Try your iPhone trick with it. I'm seeing Varroa and all sorts of stuff in there.
Okay. Thank you.